Massive welcome to everybody along today. My name is Claire. I'm a Green Schools Biodiversity Officer. We're really pleased to have you here with us to celebrate Food and Biodiversity Week. And it's a really special week because it's during the Green Schools 25th anniversary. So we're delighted to have you here with us. Just a couple of quick notes before we start. We are recording this session, but we will only be recording the screens of the facilitators, so you can have your video on or off, and you won't be recorded. Do please keep your microphones muted during the session, because we do have quite a lot of schools joining us. But we would love to hear from you, so please do put any questions you have in the chat box. And we're really delighted to have Kate Egan and Sean O'Farrell with us today. So we're going to have two really nice presentations. And we're going to start off with Sean. So Sean is a farmer in North Tipperary, and he's going to give us a bit of a presentation, and then Kate will speak to us just afterwards. Kate is coming to us from Westmeath. And then after both presentations, we will have time for a Q&A. So do get your questions ready.
The Galeris, Mr. Sean O'Farrell, Tommy Imaconi, Tiberdorn, is Fermior Organic Misha, August Alon Semagums and Nador, August on Timpolo. So good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome. My name is Sean O'Farrell. I'm living in County Tipperary, and I'm an organic farmer, and I have a great interest in nature and the environment. And I'm delighted to get the opportunity just to introduce you to my farm and how I farm and what I do to help nature on my farm. So, okay, there, please.
Yep.
So, Plant Cannon Biofarm is actually a Science Foundation Ireland Discover Primary Science Centre, and we would have primary school students coming along to do their explorations and investigations of the different habitats and working in as teams and gathering results and all of those activities. But also we have programs for secondary school students. But anyhow, that's just my roadside sign, and we can move on to, I'll tell you a little bit more. And so as an organic farmer, I keep some cows and some calves, I keep some pigs and some donkeys, and I have a goose and goat, and I can show you some pictures a little bit. Okay, there. I'm also growing my own food, because I think for me, every day I get up, I think the most important job I do in my day is to eat really good quality food. So you can see in the front of the picture, I have some purple sprouting broccoli there in the front of the picture, and that is it's a great crop to grow, because at this time of the year in April we have what we call the hungry patch. There's lots of vegetables not really mature yet, but this guy comes through the winter and is a great source of minerals and nutrition for me. And there's some leeks growing in the background. But then not only is those vegetables in the garden food for me, but they will also attract insects, and insects will attract birds and so on. There, please. So you might wonder, what are we looking at here? And so this is actually a ring fort on my farm. And so it's a beautiful structure, and it's on a high peak on my farm. So it's a great view of the surrounding countryside. And a few years ago, I got some people that were skilled with craft to create an old dwelling that had been used by people living in the swing fort maybe 1,500 years ago, or maybe around the time of St. Patrick. But I do know that the people who lived in a ring fort like this, like me, they would have been farmers. So for me now, as I farm the farm, this is almost one of the most important features on my farm. It makes me think and reflect and spend some time pondering about how people lived before, all those years ago, and all those generations of people have passed by since somebody lived in a hut like that. But it also makes me think farming and farming in the future. So I kind of wondered to myself, what will farming be like in 1,500 years forward? And what can I do in the farm to make it better for the next generations that will follow after me? Because at the most, if you look at me, I will probably finish farming in 50 years time or less, you know. And so that's something that I need. So yeah, and it's a really attractive place on the farm for visiting students, because we can also reflect on our needs and our wants and how we live our lives. You know, the people who lived here, everything they needed to survive, they found some wild apple or wild fruit, or go down to the local river and get some fishing, or go to the woodland and bring back some firewood, or bring back some wood for building structures like you can see here, or to fence in their animals. So everything was very, very local. And as you can well appreciate, we live a very different life nowadays. You know, we're running off to the supermarket and we're flying to New York for shopping. We do a lot of crazy things in 2023. But anyhow, so that's why I think the rink fort is such an important feature, because it causes me to think, and it causes visiting people to the farm to think, you know, about how we live. Okay, I'll move on. We'll move on there. Thanks. So this is a hedgerow, a typical hedgerow on my farm, and I have a great fondness for hedgerows because they are wonderful little homes for many different creatures. And there's also a history attached to the hedgerows, because these hedgerows had to be built by farmers that were on this land, and maybe many of them on the farm were 250 years old or thereabouts. So if you can imagine yourself, we're talking about history, but no big or big machinery for creating a beautiful habitat like this. It had to be done by hand with shovels and picks, and then planting the trees and the different varieties of trees we see here. So that you can see there's history associated with it. But as you look at it also, there's a couple of important features to take note of. You can see that there's trees and plants of different heights. On the right-hand side, there's a really high ash tree. A little bit on the extreme left here, there is a hawthorn tree, or we call it a May bush also, and it's got some ivy on the top of it. So those are at different heights. So on the ash tree on the right, you might get the song thrush singing up there really early in the morning, greeting the day and saying, "This is my space here, and you stay over in your space." And the robin might be in the robin or the pigeons in the ivy in the whitethorn trees on the left at the moment. And other birds are very busy building at different other levels. So the different heights are important for different bird species. And then it's also important if you have many different plant types, because the different plants will be flowering at different times of the year. And of course, they will be visited by flying insects and bumblebees and hoverflies, and all these guys will be pollinating the flowers, and those flowers then will turn into fruit. Fruit for the birds, and not only fruit for the birds, but fruit for other animals, like the pine marten will eat some fruit, and the badger might eat some fruit, like crab apples or some blackberries and stuff like that. So there is a really, really important reserve of food within that hedgerow, shelter, and it's a corridor for creatures to get through safely through the landscape. And by night, you will have maybe bats hunting along by the hedgerow, feeding on flying insects like moths and stuff like that. You know? So it's a wonderful resource for nature, but it's also a great shelter for my animals to protect them from the strong winds or the cold nights, you know. So it's a very important part of my farm. So that's great. There, if we can move on, please. So yeah, this is my sideways picture. That, but you can still see the same story. If you look around the edges, you will see the plants around the edges. So the plants are taking the energy from the sun, and they're producing the flowers and producing the leaves. And then you have if you look at the picture closely, you can see some ladybugs, snails and slugs, and I see some butterflies. All those guys are going to be feeding on the plants. And then you're going to have other guys there, and they're feeding on those little guys. So the hedgehog that you were looking at might eat the slug, and the fox might eat the hedgehog, or the badger might eat the hedgehog, and the mouse is there too. It might eat the slug, and the kestrel or something on it. So it's called a hedgerow food web. So you can see why. So that's why the hedge is going forward. Thank you, there. We can move on, please. Okay, so here's a few beautiful visitors who some of these guys just arrived onto Cloncannon Farm in about the last 2 weeks. Especially the willow warbler, which and I could mix up the willow warbler and the chiffchaff because they're fairly much alike. The lad on the top right, as you look at it, with good out of yellow on it, is a willow warbler. And it's great to hear the lovely melody of their song. They usually arrive around the 2nd or 3rd week of April, and they have flown all the way from somewhere around the Mediterranean or North Africa. And the lad on the left-hand side, as we look at the screen with the black cap, he's actually called the black cap, and he arrived from the same area. And I think it's got a song. Could compete with the song thrush to be a prize winner for the singing. So that's the black cap, and the guy down on the bottom left is the chiffchaff. Very easy to appreciate its name because it makes that sound, chiffchaff, chiffchaff. The guy on the bottom right is a bit of a rogue, you could say. He's a bit of a rogue because that's the cuckoo. And the cuckoo comes along and sneaks into another bird's nest and lets the other bird raise the chick. So that's quite a sneaky guy, you know what I mean? But that's everybody has their strategy, you know. So that's lovely to have those guys coming onto the farm at the moment. Thank you, there. Okay, yeah. As I was making this PowerPoint presentation, I was walking through my farm, and I came on this beautiful willow tree. It's quite an amazing willow tree because I think it's probably quite old, you know. But it's amazing also, if you look on it on the left-hand side, one of the branches or one of the limbs has actually fallen down towards the ground. Okay. But even though it has fallen down towards the ground, is touching the ground, and some of it is dead and dying, more of it is actually continuing to grow up straight towards the sun again. So I think it's of huge value for wildlife because dead wood is also important to creatures like, you know what I mean, like the beetles and woodlouse and creatures like that. And then if they're there, the field mouse and the shrew and the badger or the hedgehog might eat those guys. So yeah, that's beautiful. And you can see at the moment it's a kind of blossoming at the moment, and the bumblebees like to go to the willow trees early in the springtime when other things are not flowering so early. So it's a very important time. So that's lovely. Thank you, there. Okay, so you might wonder what we're looking at here. Well, it's the corner of a field. And sometimes if I'm driving in my tractor or whatever, a field corner can be a little bit awkward to get around. So what is actually a nice thing to do is to fence off the field corner and to plant in some native trees. So the trees there, the most immediate ones are to the front are some alder, and I see some green ones there in back a little bit in the middle of the picture. Those are Scots pine. So I like to plant in many of our native trees into those field corners, and it creates a nice habitat for many of those creatures that I mentioned earlier. And I will show you different woodlands and different little small woodlands I have created on the farm over the last number of years, and you will see there are different stages. And this is only about, I suppose it's maybe 3-4 years old since I planted them. So, thank you, there. Oh yes. So I talked about a hedgerow earlier. This is a hedgerow that has a stream running down by it, and you can see there's a lovely mix of different flowers and stuff growing here. It's facing towards the south, so it's going to be basking in the sun. You know, it's going to be lovely for the sun. The primrose there on the bottom left-hand side is just a lovely lovely angle to catch the sun's sunlight every day. And with some yellow flowers there, there's celandines, and I think there's some violets and stuff there as well. So it's a beautiful little patch along by a hedgerow that has a river running by it. And we will talk about some of the little creatures that might be in the river a little bit later. Thank you, there. Okay, so this is another wood I created on the farm. It's called Gallagher's Wood, as you can see, and you can see how much more mature this is. This is probably at least I'd say 15 or 18 years since I planted this wood on the farm. So there's some crabapple there, and again there's some oak, and there's some birch, and there's some yew, and there's many of our native trees. And I'm sure many of the students will know many of our native trees. So I try to get all of our native trees planted around the farm. Perfect. And again, here this one is only about 3 years. Again, with a great mix of native trees. I have the chairs standing beside the fence, so that I can stand up in one chair and step over the wire and get down into the woodland. So that's my strategy. Yeah. Great job. Thank you. And again, this is another one. It's much older again. Yeah, that's probably about 18 years again. I'd say, or thereabouts. Yeah. So it's brilliant. It's walking through the farm now. There's much more bird song, you know, and it would be buzzing sometimes, and there's lovely smell from the different fragrances of the different flowers that are trying to attract the insects as well. So my senses are being stimulated by the song and the smell and all those things. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So I mentioned earlier about the summertime visitors to the farm. Like I mentioned, if you remember, I mentioned the willow warbler, the blackcap, the chiffchaff, and the cuckoo. So then come autumn, winter, when the weather gets cold up in Scandinavia, these guys come down to Tipperary, and they come down to Ireland, and they're hoping that there will be some nice berries in the hedgerow. So here we have on the right is called the red wing, and you can see the little bit of red on the wing. And the other one is a fieldfare, and they are both related to the song thrush and the blackbird. So it's lovely to see those guys. They usually go through the hedgerow in flocks, feeding on haws and the haw is fruit, whitethorn. So yeah, so the farm is a great resource for those guys. So however, we have an international connection, really, you know, and it's important to appreciate that, you know. Scandinavia to the Mediterranean or North Africa. Right. Okay, so we're going down on the farm now. We're down beside the pond area, and we'll talk about ponds in a few minutes. But this is actually a little structure that I got a friend to create on the farm. So this is actually a live willow structure. It's kind of pretty much circular. But it's also creating a habitat. You know, I had some birds coming along and wrens making nests in it. So it's fantastic. You know, and yeah, it's good. It's nice for the eye to see. And yeah. So that's it. Yes, so at the moment now I have 4 ponds on the farm. One of them just went in last December, and I will show you that in a few minutes. But this pond and a few other ponds on the farm are probably about 20 years on the farm now. Yes, it's a wonderful habitat because there's so many creatures that will live in this habitat. You will have different insects and preferring different parts of this pond habitat. like on the surface, you will have the surface dwellers, like you will have little whirligig beetles and pond skaters and guys like that was is whizzing around the surface of the water without, and they're able to whiz around without getting drowned, you know, because they have there's a little there's surface tension on the surface on the top of the water, and that's why they're able to get around so fast. But they are watching out for other insects that might fall into the pond, and they would immediately dash over and you could say stick a spear in them, and that's their dinner. You know what I mean? That's nature. And then the next part of the pond, you could say, is in the middle of the pond, where you know where you're going to have the little minnows and water boatmen and guys like that, and other little bugs and beetles is in the middle of the pond. And the third zone of where people or creatures like to live is down in the mud, in the bottom. Yeah, so sometimes you will have a certain stage of the dragonfly life cycle. They would spend it down in the mud, and sometimes the frogs will stay in the mud in the winter time, and yeah, and then around the edge, the edge is the fourth part of this habitat where creatures might hide so they don't get eaten by somebody else, or they might be hiding around the edge of the pond so they can sneak up on some other creature. You know, so that's what it's about, trying to stay, avoid getting eaten and find some other creature to eat. And many of these creatures spend part of their life cycle in the water, and they will eventually emerge as flying insects. Okay, some like the mayfly will only live for one day, and they will lay eggs back into the water again and start the whole life cycle again. But others will live maybe for just for that 1 year, or they might going to get 2 years of life. But some of the most beautiful ones are some of the dragonflies and damselflies. Beautiful, and they're like little miniature helicopters. They can go at this and they have eyes that can see 360 degrees all around. So that's a great strategy to avoid getting eaten by something else. And of course, those guys then when they're flying around, some of them will be flying by night, and they will be food for the bats by night. So it's a wonderful habitat. Yeah, go again there, please. So I mentioned to you that I had a fourth pond. This pond was just put in onto the farm last December, and I did not need to put in any liner to keep the water there. The soil was the soil enough to hold the water, and I did not bring any plants or any animals into the pond. It's amazing how nature, the seeds will spread across from one pond to another, and in a few years, hopefully, if we ever come back to look at this again, there will be many different plant species there, and there will be lots of dragonflies flying around and great diving beetles and hopefully loads and loads of tadpoles and frogs and newts and everything like that. So that's a lovely new feature to the farm. Okay, thank you. Oh yeah. So this is just a little picture showing you some of the little things that I mentioned. You know, it's again like we looked at the hedgerow, and my sideways picture was showing you a web of life. Well, this is like a little web of life here from the river or from the pond. You're going to have the plants, of course, or the food sources, and they start off the food chain and the food web. And then you're going to have little maybe even some pond snails. I see some pond snails there. You've got the pond snail, and you've got the ram's horn pond snail, and then you're going to have other little creatures feeding on those, and something else feeding on those, and maybe there's other guys there. There's a heron there as well. Maybe I hope there is, but if there's not, a heron might be sitting on the side or standing on the side of the pond then to eat the fish or eat the tadpole. So yeah, it's a web of life. Okay, so this is just an example of some of the wonderful design of the creatures that might be in the pond or in the river. These guys were taken from a river in the farm, and these are mayfly nymphs. So it's 3 stages to their life cycle. So first of all, you will have the egg stage, then this nymph or larvae stage, and then they will eventually emerge from the pond or river as flying insects. And it's amazing if you can look at these guys underneath a microscope. It's phenomenal to see, the design, and you can see the gills moving on the side of their body, generating oxygen in the water, and they have little hooks on their feet so that they can cling on to stones that they don't get washed away down the river. It's amazing nature and design of these organisms. Okay, so I mentioned to you earlier about planting different trees on the farm, and I'm just going to show you some of those trees. Maybe you already know all our native trees, but you will see top of the left is holly tree. Then on the next one over is a whitethorn or hawthorn tree. And some people call it the May bush because it flowers in the month of May, and it's really, really attractive in the month of May. And it's wonderful for bees and the pollinators. And as I mentioned earlier, as you can see there, the amount of berries on that now. So those berries might still be on that tree in November, December. And then, as you can imagine, those birds coming in from Scandinavia, the redwing and the fieldfare, they will have a real party feeding on those, So then down on the bottom left, we have the Scots pine. And beside it, you can see there's a tree with some nuts on it. It's a hazel. Okay. Go again there, please. And top of the left is a crabapple. And then the next one on top of the right is a mountain ash. The bottom of the left, you might know that particular shape of the leaf. It is an oak tree. The next one, bottom on the right, is a birch, and it's a silver birch. You can see that lovely kind of gray silver type color in the bark. That's a silver birch. Okay, there. Oh yes. So we're back to look at some another side of the picture, lads. This is another one of my animals on the farm. A young calf born in spring of this year. And yeah, so it's beautiful, and it's just curious about me and my phone and my camera, and it comes over for curiosity. Yeah. So and I have it there just to introduce you to the next picture or slide. So you just think of that animal for the moment, and you think about its mother or whatever that's there as well, and we'll go on to the next slide. Okay. So now you might say, well, what is that? Oh, so this is a cow poo. But you might also say, oh, that's a funny looking cow poo. It's got lots of little holes in it. And it does, because in nature, nothing is wasted. So when cow poo is around, some people come along and try to feed on it. And eventually they're feeding on it, and it gets recycled back into the soil. Did you know that? What's the holes? Many of the holes are made by dung beetles. So dung beetles are very, very important because they're interested in getting some nice food. So this might be their breakfast or their dinner, and that's them happy for the day. But sometimes they're also taking that cow poo down into the soil, and that cow poo then helps to make the soil more nutritious, better, more fertile for growing grass and stuff. So the dung beetles are very important animal on my farm. Lovely. Okay. I think for me, I don't know what you see, but I think there's meant to be some animals on that picture. But sorry about that. You don't see any animals. You only see trees. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry about that. That's the landscape anyhow of Cloncannon. I live in the hills of Tipperary, near the Devil's Bit Mountain. Okay, lovely. Thank you. We'll go again, Claire, please. Okay, so we're coming near the end of my presentation, and I just said I'd introduce you to some of my friends. I don't know, can you imagine what that is? But I'm just about seeing the top of the head of one of my beautiful donkeys. So you'll have to appreciate and forgive me for my poor technical ability, but that's one of my donkeys. I hope the next picture comes up better. Oh my goodness. Well, maybe this could be a kind of a quiz for you guys looking on. Right. What animal does this head belong to? What animal does this back belong to? Well, the head belonged to a donkey. This is part of a pig. One of my pigs. If you get the pig, you'll have to sometime maybe come and see it in reality. Okay. Hopefully the next picture might be better. Oh my goodness, you didn't get to see the goose. So I have a goose too. So oh yes, well yeah, I really wanted to kind of give you those creatures to kind of say goodbye to you from Cloncannon Biofarm, and I hope you enjoyed my introduction to you about farming with nature and farming for the future. So thank you very much for watching.
So hi to everyone. It's very strange talking to a lot of people that I can't see. So I hope you're all having a good day. Thank you for having us in your classrooms to talk today, and thanks for coming on to listen. So Sean showed you a lot of pictures about his gorgeous farm and all the different animals and plants he has that are there, that are working together to create an amazing ecosystem. And so I'm going to chat to you a little bit about, we're going to touch on an awful lot of what Sean has said, but it's about this idea around farming and the potential for farming. And so farming, it's kind of a little bit of a joke, but it's also not really. It's that we hear an awful lot of bad news today around the environment, about things that are going wrong and all the problems, and there's climate change, and there's trees being cut down for deforestation, and we're there's maybe soil or air pollution and soil loss. And I don't know if you guys have heard too much about these, but they're not the greatest stories to have to listen to. You can feel very small, like what can we do? But if Claire goes on to the next slide there, the question that I wanted to ask today in my talk was, how farming can save the world? And I thought the amazing thing about Sean's talk is he talked about so many things that his one farm was doing that were having huge positive impacts on these big issues. And that's the really nice thing about farming. And not just, farming, yes, can happen on really big farms, but it can actually, all of the things that we talk about today can happen, in the back of your school, the back of your house, in a place near your home. There's ways for us to work with all these things and work to improve them. So if we go on to the next slide there, Claire. So one of the big ones, I'm sure most people have heard the term climate change at this point, and this idea that the climate is not stable at the moment. So we're getting all these strange events like really hot weather events in Ireland or across the world, really cold weather or flooding or big huge hurricanes and things. And one of the issues around one of the main causes of this is there's too much of this stuff called carbon in the atmosphere. So the best way that we can do is we want to take and reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And one of the best ways we have of doing that is planting trees and increasing what's called biomass. So essentially the amount of living plants that are growing, because when plants and trees grow, they take in carbon dioxide, and they actually also clean air for us as well at the same time. So next slide there, Claire. Thanks. So I'm going to show you some of the ways that we've been tackling these big problems on a very small scale at my farm. So this was my farm when I moved in, about 8 years ago now. And while there's some really nice hedgerows there, there's not much growing other than just a couple of grass species between the two hedgerows. So this is obviously just one field, and this is the front field. So over time, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get loads of stuff growing, but I also wanted I needed to be able to sell what I was growing too. So we set up a market garden. So within a few years, we turned it from this into, next slide, into this. So you can see how there's so much more volume of stuff. So all of that is taking carbon out of the atmosphere and bringing it down into the soil, because as the plants then die, they build up the soil, and we get to increase the amount of carbon that's then locked into our soil. So next slide there, Claire. Thanks. And again, so that's just another photo. And then this was another field. So I also planted an enormous amount of trees. So we've got orchards and hazelnut orchard and fruit orchards. And so this was again about 7 years ago. And this is what it looks like today. So here you can see how much bigger the trees have gotten, how much more mature. So they'll have all sequestered carbon down into their, into the actual tree itself, because all of our plants and animals were all carbon-based life forms. So we take the carbon from the atmosphere and use it as the building blocks for the trees. And then there are many other wonderful benefits of having so many trees and plants growing. One is that they provide us with clean air by taking in CO2 into the plant. They breathe that in, and then they release or they take that in during photosynthesis, and they release oxygen, clean air for us to breathe. And then the other is that they can actually help with flood prevention. So they soak up liters and hundreds of liters of water per mature tree. And the field there on the right that has the big hazel trees, that the previous picture were just tiny little ones, that used to flood every year pretty badly. And now there'd be very little flooding and just usually some wet ground instead. So there's been a huge shift and change in how that all works. The other thing the trees can do is they can bind the soil together, and they can prevent soil erosion. So all their roots are keeping the soil on the ground stable and secure, and reducing the chances of things like mudslides and those sorts of processes if there's not enough cover of plants and trees to hold the soil together. Okay, let's see what's on the next slide. Oh yeah, this was sort of my funny story. I had a bit of a mystery. So one of the other things around biomass is not just having it all be the same, there being a diversity, because plants, they work together like a community, and not everyone in the community can do the same thing really well. So they all have different skills that they're brilliant at. Some can cope when it's really hot and they can find water down really far. Others can cope with very cold temperatures and still survive. Others will get different types of nutrients from the soil and share them amongst all the different plants using mushroom threads. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in the soil. So I wanted to encourage a more greater diversity, because when I moved in, there was only a couple of species of grass in the grass, and I wanted wildflowers and more grass species. However, every time I would sow seeds, either the birds would get them, or the wind would blow them away, or they wouldn't take, or the cold rain would get at them. And I didn't want to turn over the soil to dig and plant seeds that way, because I wanted to maintain the grass that was there and the soil community that was already there. And one day I went out to my field and I started finding wildflowers. So this white one here is yarrow, which is a beautiful one and has a lot of medicinal values as well. So it can be good for different kind of sicknesses and things for herbalists to use. And then there's clover there, the little pink one, the red clover, and we've got buttercup and many other things. And I had absolutely no idea how it had gotten there, until I started to realize that I had changed the food that I'd given the horses. And so my horses were now eating food with all of these wildflower seeds in it that were good for their digestive system. And it turned out that the seeds were passing through and coming out in their poo, and then they were growing from the poo. So the horses were reseeding and adding wildflower seeds all over my farm. So I'm quite excited to see what comes this year. We even had lots of sunflowers growing that I hadn't planted, that I was a total mystery. So that was very exciting. Next one, Claire. So So the other thing that we have is that we have a challenge with our food, because at the moment, much of our food that's grown does not contain enough nutrients. And often people are ending up, they might be unhealthy because of the food they have access to. So growing and producing healthy food is really important as another big world problem. And the healthier people are, the better they can stave off diseases and infections and things like that. So healthy food is hugely important, and is a big world problem that needs addressing. So next picture, Claire. And so how we address that at our farm is that we use a method called no-dig gardening. And this no-dig method allows us to grow really what are called nutrient-dense food. So food that's just packed full of really good vitamins and minerals. Because for most food that's produced today in mass production, you would have to eat, say, for example, 10 oranges today to get the nutrients of one orange 50 years ago. And that's to do with the change in how we produce food. So we've started to kind of go back and find different and better ways to produce the food, and we're hoping to, build up the soil so the soil is functioning healthily again, because soil isn't just dirt in the ground. It's a live and vibrant community, like a forest underneath your feet. There's hundreds of different insects and creatures and species that we can't even see with our eyes, and they're all working together. They're working together to turn the soil into something that can hold water, that can have lots of nutrients, and has loads of organisms that all help feed the plant. And the plant actually works with all of these different creatures and organisms and species to help improve the soil and keep the soil working well. So every time we dig into the soil and turn it over to grow food, we're actually breaking up all the hard work that all these creatures have done. And so what we want to do is we wanted to find a method that stopped us having to dig into the soil and turn it over. And the other thing that happens when we dig into the soil and turn it over is that we expose it to air and rain and wind, and then it can start to erode or break down. So it dries out and the wind blows it away and the water is lost, and it also releases carbon, which contributes to climate change. So what we wanted to do was stop all of that. So we use this method of no dig, where we build compost on top of the beds, and we have much healthier soil. It's easier to grow, is less work involved in digging, and the food is also incredibly healthy and much more resistant to pests and diseases, which also means that we don't have to, spray on things that aren't so good for it, like herbicides and pesticides. Okay, so I'm just going to show you some examples of the lovely vegetables that we grew. So if Claire wants to, we can go through these relatively fast, Claire. So the other thing about growing your own food, you can go on to the next one, is that there are many things that when you grow them, you're much more willing to eat and try than you would do if you were to buy it in the supermarket. You can hold there for a second, Claire. And so like for years, I wouldn't have eaten kale or even some broccoli. And now when I grow it out the back, it's just so different. It tastes different, it smells different, and it's really exciting every time it's ready, because I have to wait, you got to wait for it to be ready, and then you can bring it in and try it and cook it. And it really tastes so different. I can't fully explain why. And then I'd be 10 years ago, I'd never grown a single thing. I couldn't keep anything alive. And I just started to get really interested and excited about growing things. And so I taught myself how to grow loads. And then as I kind of got used to growing the normal stuff like broccoli and potatoes, I got interested in growing some different things. So the picture to the right or the left with the pink flower is actually a peach. And so that's growing in a greenhouse on the farm. And then the next one are figs. And I never would have eaten figs till I tasted them off of my own tree. So it was very exciting. And they're very sweet and lovely. And then over on the last picture, we have asparagus. And this is actually how asparagus looks as it's growing. And it gets big and bushy after a while when it has been finished being picked. Next slide, Claire. And these are hazelnuts, which has been very exciting to grow on the farm as well, which is really interesting. And there's a lot of people shifting diets to more vegetarian diets, and they're looking for vegetarian protein, good food that they can eat that's produced in Ireland, and hazelnuts and nuts are one of those options. It doesn't hurt that they go really well with chocolate and taste really good in cookies either. So next one. And here we have lots of salads and greens, all really healthy and vibrant. And when most of our salads, they're flown 13,000 kilometers around the world before they make it to our plate. Whereas the stuff that comes from your local market garden or local farmer, you know, is only coming a few miles, and the food lasts longer, it has more energy and vitality. And so it just ends up tasting better. And then that makes us want to eat good food. Because if you're getting stuff that's flown a long way and it doesn't taste very good, often we don't want to eat the really good food that we know we should. Okay, next. And that's just another example there of some nice kale, just like Sean was saying. It's the hungry gap. So that means we're waiting for the new food to come on, and most of the old food is used up. All the old potatoes and onions, they're all used up. So we're living off of things like kale. And once upon a time now, I would have no interest in kale, but lately, when you start to grow it yourself, it's so interesting, and there's so many things you can do with it. Next one. So the final big topic that we're going to talk about today is biodiversity. So this is another really big one. Currently, we are at one of the biggest species loss in known history, and that's down to how we're managing and how we're working with nature and our natural resources. So one area where farming can really, really help when it's done well and it's done with nature in mind is that it can protect biodiversity. So biodiversity is all the different types of living creatures, animals, bugs, mushrooms, everything. It includes everything. And the greater a diversity we have, the more diverse biodiversity we have, the better our natural resources are, that the nature of Ireland, the better it can support human life. So it provides us with services, things like clean air, clean water, food, medicine, climate regulation, which means, you know, maintaining a healthy climate for us so it's not too hot or too cold. So there's so many things that biodiversity gives us, and so for us to be working to support it is really important. So here's a few ways and a few things that we've changes that have happened on our farm. So here you see in the left, far left, is a giant puffball. So it's a huge mushroom the size of a football. And when it gets old, it puffs out these spores to spread for new mushrooms the following year. And then we've got a bird's nest up high in the tree, and a small tiny hole for small creatures to live. So the first thing what these are demonstrating is providing habitats, homes and places where creatures can live, from homes underground in the soil, like for the mushroom, up high in the trees, and small ones in small nooks and crannies by leaving things like dead wood that Sean was talking about in his farm as well. Next slide there, Claire. And then this is another example of, over on the left, we have what's called a microhabitat. So this is just a dead branch, but on it, it's got loads of lichen and tiny baby slugs, and many other things living in just this tiny stick. And then over to the other side, we have a macro habitat. So that's a big habitat where it's actually a badger set, and they would need a much bigger space to live and roam around and survive. Next one. And again, just more dead wood to provide homes and places for animals to live. And there we've got some bats. They live in the attic and they're brilliant. They eat all the midges and some moths when there's too many moths. And the midges are the tiny insects that can give you a bite that makes it's a bit itchy afterwards. And I'm really glad to have lots of bats to try and eat them up because they can get very annoying. This baby bat got a bit lost, and so we took rescue him and put him back out so you could find somewhere to fly off to. And we have wonderful visitors living on the farm now in hedgehogs. And I love creating habitat for things like hedgehogs because they help me with the pest control to protect my plants. So they eat slugs and snails and things that would eat my plants. And they also eat worms and beetles as well. And there's making space for lots of those things to attract the hedgehogs, so they've got lots of food to eat, and then they can eat the things that would attack my plants, which is brilliant, attack the vegetables, which is great. And then we've got butterflies up the top, beautiful painted lady, and a moth down below. This is a night flying moth. That there's someone studying different species of moths on the farm at the moment, which is really interesting. I didn't know too much about them, so it's very fascinating to learn. I've had about 12 or 13 different species have been found so far. So yeah, and that's fine. Next one, Claire. And here we have a conservation hive with native honeybees coming in and out, lovely spiders preying on flies as well. And down below, some tadpoles that are from the new pond. And we really want lots of tadpoles and lots of frogs because they also eat pests such as flies and slugs and snails and things too. So delighted to have lots of them there. And this is my new pond. So it's very small. It looks a bit different to this now because it's been finished. This is an early photograph of it. And a little bit smaller than Sean's because my farm's a little bit smaller, but every little bit of habitat is really helpful. And you'll see here on the right, there's those kind of cloudy things in the picture are frog spawn. So I'm hoping that we'll have lots of frogs coming on this year. And again, to help with not just pest control, but they'll also become food for other things like owls and foxes. So that will increase up through the food web, more food for other things. And then this is the final picture here, just of like, because I've been leaving dead wood lie on the ground in places and not cutting near the bases of some trees, the soil has improved, that we now have wild mushrooms growing and many different species. I think the one on the right is a bluet, and I am still not sure of the one on the left. Mushrooms are something you need to be very careful of and really know if you're going to try to eat any. You need to know exactly what you're looking at because there's lots of poisonous ones out there. But they're not just for eating, although animals will eat them too, but they also help the trees communicate with each other and send food back and forth. The tiny threads of the mushrooms under the ground can allow trees to send food and nutrients back and forth and help them survive better. So it's really wonderful to see them growing. And then below we just have, wildflowers and some elderberries and the giant sunflower that grew because the horses eating and dropping off food. I'm sorry, my dog has come into the room, so it's my noise. And then some other wildflowers like bugle and a lovely bumblebee on the mint there. So none of these things were here just 7 years ago, and I think that gives us a lot of hope as to how much can grow and be restored within a short period of time. And it can happen on a very large area. But I also have a wonderful patch that's, no bigger than, maybe like 2 meters by 1 meter wide. And that holds a huge amount of diversity in it, just because of the way it's managed and planted. So I hope you guys get to explore and maybe try a bit of regenerative farming at your school and see what can grow. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks a million, Kate. That was brilliant. Really, really great stuff. Loved all the pictures at the end, and it was great to hear kind of the same messages coming from yourself and Sean about just how much positivity we can all do. So we'll just give, if anybody has any questions they want to ask, please do pop them in the chat box, and we will pass them on to Sean or to Kate. I have loads of questions, but I don't want to take over, but I might just quickly ask one thing to either of you really, because we do have a lot of schools here with us that do grow vegetables in school. What would you say would be, if a school was just starting out, beginning to grow, and maybe had a smaller space to work with, is there any that you would recommend, kind of bearing in mind that schools, it's kind of a short growing season for schools with the Easter holidays, and you know, finishing up for primary schools at the end of June or secondary schools at the end of May? What do you think? We'll give Kate's just finished talking. What do you think, Sean? Would you have any advice?
Yes, salad is probably a good option, and because salad will grow, you know, you could sow your seeds today, and you could have some salad for harvesting in the middle of May. You know, so salad is a good option. Another good option would be radishes. Radishes grow quite quickly also. So salad and radishes, but then you could also, just like Kate was mentioning about the hungry gap, you could sow some kale and some broccoli, and then you would have those coming through in the garden. This time next year, you'll be feeding on those, you know. So that's just, you could, a longer term, short term planning and longer term planning. Yeah.
Brilliant, great. Thanks for that, Sean. So a few questions coming in now. So 6th class boys in Cairn say thank you so much for brilliant presentations. Very important question. They would like to know, what is the name of Kate's dog?
Come here. Kate's dog's come up to say hi. His name is Lincoln. Claire, can I add a little bit of something to Sean's
Yeah,
advice?
absolutely.
Would that be okay? For schools, I would really recommend considering a small patch for a perennial system, because perennials can mature over the summer. They don't need that much taking care of, and they can be ready in the autumn season. So things like perennial leeks, because you don't have to plant them every year, and they would be ready about now. Things like, you know, an apple tree that's late getting ready, so that would be picked for September, late September. And hazelnut tree, again, you'd have hazelnuts then in September. And autumn raspberries, because it can be really hard, the maintenance and between the holidays and everything for your kind of annual vegetables. But there's so much there with the perennial options that, you know, even Jerusalem artichokes, you know, you could be digging them up in February and things like that. So that would allow you to be experimenting and cooking and using the veg while you're actually in school.
Brilliant. Thanks for making that, Kate. Big question here from Morris O'Doherty's class, which is, how do farms generate income? So there's probably lots of different, you could probably talk for a long time about this. Anybody like to give a bit of an overview?
Yep. Okay. Yes, a really good question. So for me and my farming enterprise, I try to be doing many things. So I'm not depending, I don't keep all my eggs in one basket. So I keep the pigs, and I sell some pork and some sausages and burgers, and I sell some purple sprout and broccoli or some kale. And also you see the cows and the calves. So I'm selling the calves when they are weaned from their mothers at about 9 months of age, and they go to another organic farmer. So I have income coming in from there also. And as I mentioned to you, I have school groups coming onto my farm. And this week, just last month, had some Leaving Cert biology students coming onto the farm to do their ecology fieldwork. And we do a little bit of social farming. And we do a little bit of tourism. So yeah, so a diversity of different activities.
Brilliant, thanks.
Kate might like to add more there.
Yeah, it's very, very similar actually. I agree with Sean around the diversity. I think is because like diversity in nature, diversity in life, because it adds resilience. If one thing just doesn't work that year, you know, if you've got a crop fit. So I have a lot of things as well. I used to have a market garden. I've kind of paused that for the moment for several reasons. But I loved running it, and I love being connected with people by giving them their vegetables, and they're so appreciative of really good of food. but then also have camping and some tourism, education, and then kind of pick your own stuff is going to be growing or coming up for me for this year as well, so people can come to the farm and they can pick some hazelnuts or apples, or depending on what's ready at that time of year. So yeah, lots of diversity, but in generally speaking, it can be very challenging to generate an income. Sorry, this dog is upstaging me. Get up here. I'm just being pawed. It can be very difficult to generate income on large scales for farming. It's become, I think, unless you're starting to move into regenerative methods, it has become very challenging for farmers to make a full income. So yeah, before I started farming, I really didn't know much about it, and since starting, I have gained enormous respect for the work that farmers from across all spectrums of farming do. So it is not, they feed us, and it's not an easy job. Thanks, Claire.
Brilliant, thanks for those answers, guys. Really interesting to hear your perspectives on that. Another question here. So the Loreto girls would like to know, what is your favorite job on the farm? Start with you, Sean.
Okay. One of my favorite jobs is actually feeding myself. Yeah. So going out, I go out in the morning and I might pick Kate was showing some yarrow in her fields. I might go out and pick some yarrow, some dandelion is in leaf at the moment, and some plantain. So I pick those, and I go to the greenhouse and I get some salads, and I come in and I add some natural yogurt. Okay, I'm after buying the natural yogurt, and I make up some really, really good food for myself. So that's one of the most important jobs for me in my day. But then also I love going to my pigs, because the pigs are very intelligent animals. And you can have you can almost have, I would use this word, you can have a relationship with your animals. The two of them are two different characters completely. One that is very, very friendly. The other guy will stay back in the background and looking for a while before he come up and say hello, and the pigs are so I really enjoy those. Another job, I love planting trees. A little bit like Kate again, she plants a lot of trees. I love planting trees. I especially love planting trees around Christmas time. It's a kind of almost my spiritual journey at that time of the year, is to get out planting trees. Yeah, so maybe Kate, like.
Thanks, Sean. What about yourself, Kate?
Oh yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, I love all the things that Sean said as well. I love sitting down to dinner, and everything, like, the omelette, the potatoes, the dessert fruit, like almost everything is from the farm. That's really satisfying, and really nourishing in a way that when you go to the shops, it's not the same. I just love observing too. I love observing the changes of the season, the changes in different plants and trees. I was kind of telling someone the other day that, like, the difference between, so I grew up in Dublin and did not have access to land, but I loved going out to the forest and the mountains and the rest. And the difference between, having this farm and being here and being in it every day is kind of like the difference between, if you go to the woods once a week or once a month, it's like you have a friend that you kind of see once or twice a year versus your family that you live with. You know them so much better, and there's much more you get out of that relationship and that experience. So for me, that's what being part of the land and the farm that I have the privilege of being here with. So yeah, observing, seeing how things are growing, and just watching and just sitting and being with it is really nice too. And I love planting trees as well. We're addicts.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. That's great. Now, we've gone way over time, and I could ask you questions endlessly, but I might just finish on, again, like, everyone here is coming in from a school that might have a bit of space outside, and you've given so many brilliant examples of ways you've tried to improve biodiversity on your own farms. If you could recommend one thing for schools to do to either create spaces for habitats or add one feature to their grounds or at home, what would you say would be the most beneficial? Let you go first, Sean.
Yeah, so I would probably, and maybe I'm copying Kate a little bit, I would probably say plant maybe some soft fruits or some apple trees or something like that. Because the soft fruits, say like your plums, your raspberries, your gooseberries, they're going to that's going to be great for the flying insects and the bumblebees and butterflies and those guys. Okay, and then when the fruit comes on, it's going to be great for the students. Okay, like Kate says, maybe autumn raspberries, but it's also going to be great for the birds. I have an issue trying to keep the blackbirds and all those guys from eating all my fruit. But then I'm saying, okay, you can have a lot of that fruit now, leave some for me, you know. So lots of benefits for both the students and for the wildlife to have soft fruits or orchids or whatever. Yeah, that's my recommendation. Plant it at the corner of the school grounds if possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's how long is a piece of string from my side for biodiverse, for nature. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think a garden, I think a perennial food garden is brilliant because, you know, I suppose it's asking the question as to, you know, why are we having this for nature? You know, like, it's important, particularly within a school, that maybe it's something people can interact with as well. Because if you were to do it in a different place, you might say, putting a place aside that can kind of rewild itself, that can have the space to regenerate and establish healthy functioning systems again. But within a school, it should be something that's integrated and works with the people who are there using it and involved in it. So again, I would be thinking of planting, particularly, like, I have a 2-acre food forest, which is an amazing space because everything that's in it is either for food, medicine, fiber, for, you know, weaving and making things out of, for firewood or for biodiversity, and so on. And that, you know, that allows an interaction with nature that I think is incredibly valuable and necessary for as we're growing and learning. But specific species and things, yeah, I think soft fruits is a great one to start with. It offers food for everyone and brings in pollinators and things like that. Just if you're going to do wildflowers for pollinator projects, they're really good, but just try and make sure you're sourcing native Irish ones and not ones from the UK, because they can bring varieties and species here that you know, aren't actually suitable for our pollinator species. Yeah, I think
Brilliant.
that's all. Yeah.
Great advice, guys. Yeah, I think, yeah, if we could all plant a few fruit trees, it'd be a great start. And like I said, you know, you want something that can be interacted with. So that was brilliant. I really enjoyed it, hearing from you both. Really lovely presentations. So I want to just say a big thanks to everybody for attending today and for your questions. And big thanks to Kate and to Sean for sharing all of that lovely information with us. So we will have this recording of this session up online soon if you want to share it with any other classes in your school who missed out. And yeah, we will say goodbye, and hopefully everybody gets to spend some time outside today, see if you can spot any wild foods grown, any hazelnuts. I bet some of your schools have hazel trees growing, so have a look. Okay, so big thanks again to everybody, bye, and happy biodiversity or Food and Biodiversity Week. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.